Hello, today I'd like to show you how I use my Tweed Deluxe amp. This is a Grand Tweed Deluxe. It's not a Fender, but it's the same design. It's a 5E3 circuit, so it's identical. And what I do, I plug into the normal channel here and I jump the channels from the normals high to the bright channels low. When you plug it in, it will go to the first preamp tube. It has two preamp tubes, this V1 and V2, but you plug in and you go first to the V1 preamp tube, and that has two sections, so it will split the input to either the normal channel or to the bright channel. And in that way we are able to jump the channels like I'm doing here. There's an episode that I recommend from that pedal show that also shows more in detail about these kind of things, and I will link to that in my description for this video, so you can find it there. Let's talk about the two channels. They both have two inputs, and that is a low and a high input. So the high will be the full capacity of the amp, but the low has a 6 dB pad installed in the input, so that will dampen the signal approximately 6 dB. I will use that now, and I mostly use that also when I'm playing live because it's sufficient for my use when I play smaller venues. And I like the character of the tone from the amp best. It's where it gets to the breakup point where I like it, but I have the option of going into the normal high if I like. There's also another option for me to do this, and that is if I jump it going from the normal high to the bright high, then I will get the additional 6 dB output on the bright channel's volume here, so I can blend that in. That's not my preferred way because I'm not the big fan of the tones from the amp when it's going into the bright channel and let that dominate the tone. I like to have the option to blend it in, but carefully, because it has a different character, as I said. It has more of a chaotic experience in the 5E3 circuit, as I've learned. Sounds a bit strange, but it makes sense in a way, because I tested it with this amp playing loud with the band, and I didn't really like the sound when it was plugged into the bright channels high. You can now use either one of these volumes or blend them. So if I start with taking up the volume on the normal channel, or I can just put that down and take the volume from the bright channel as it's jumped. So I hear that there's a slightly different character. There's more meat to the bone in the normal. It's fuller. Let's listen to the bright channel by itself. Yeah, I think there's a difference. I'm not sure if you're able to pick up this from the recordings, but I hear that the normal channel is fuller. So let's blend them. The reason I like to have this option is when I play different venues, the EQ or the acoustics in the room will differ. So this is great and gives the amp more flexibility, as it has only this common tone and no advanced EQ section. So I find that very useful, and it's also good to have the option of pushing it a bit harder if I choose to plug into the normal high. But this is for you to experiment with and see how you like to use it, because that will be a matter of tone preference. This is how I like to do it and how I set my tone So I just got home from a gig where I used this amp with this setting, and I had to push it to the max in this setting. And you can say sometimes it would be better to go into the normals high to have more headroom. But it sounded so good as it was, but it was on the limit to where it was sensible to do that. But it's such a good amp, and I love the tones from it. And I also get compliments from people that have listened to me playing concerts that it really sounds good. Even a sound engineer told me that, so that's not bad. I'm really happy with it. So that's how I'll set it, and from there I'll use my pedal board to color the tones. I always like to have a overdrive and just to compress the signal, because as you hear it now, if the signal is like this, with an overdrive with low gain, I can just push or compress the signal a bit. It's like almost like using a compressor, because that's also what an overdrive pedal will do, so it will take off the high spikes in a way. So here's the tones without the overdrive. Pushing the overdrive. Rounds it off just a tad. And also with this Sweet Honey overdrive, I have the option to use the focus knob to adjust how fast the guitar, when I push it, should go into breakup. So without the overdrive. Also a good sound, but with the overdrive is the preferred tone for me. I've also started using the EP booster. I put it back on my board after being away for a while, because I find that it warms up the tone even more. Without the EP booster, with yeah, so that's it. And I now have the tones that I like. I use my Supa Trem from Fulltone also. That has a preamp installed that gives kind of warm tone, so I always have that on. Without first. And with the Supa Trem. I also love that tremolo. It's so subtle and adds something, it adds a bit of life to the tone, it breathes. And of course I have my El Capistan from Strymon to add those subtle delays. And I can tap it to be in tempo with what I'm playing. And you know, this amp doesn't have any reverb, so I use my Neunaber Wet for that. I can turn it off and you can hear it dry. With the wet. And I also use the deep blue delay from Mad Professor to add a slapback. Okay, so here's the dry signal. And then I use the deep blue delay from Mad Professor to add a bit of slapback. Can you hear that? Take it off. Width. It's just subtle, but it adds a bit of almost another dimension to the tone. And then I add the Neunaber Wet for reverb. A bit much, maybe. And I have my faithful El Capistan from Strymon. This is version 1. If you have this kind of dual channel amp that has this option, test it, because it adds a feature that's I didn't use that before myself, so but after I started using it, it's become a treasured feature of the amp, because I can blend in and get it to be a bit brighter when it's maybe too full on the normal channel, which I prefer for its warmth and fullness. And then blending the two channels to get the tone I like. Okay, I hope this is useful. If you have this kind of amp, go ahead and read about it and test it for yourself. It's very useful. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Thank you.